All right, well, we're starting this new series called American Idols. Now, how many of you are familiar with the show American Idol? Right? Everybody knows American Idol, right? It's been around forever. I don't know if you know about this. It actually ran for 15 years, then it took a break, and then 3 years ago it came back on a different network, so it's still running. It was actually one of the very, very first shows that spawned all those knockoffs, right? All the spin-offs, all this performance-oriented kind of shows. And at its height, there were 30 million people that tune into American Idol every week. Crazy. And here's let me just give you some statistics. Many of the winners of the show have gone on to successful careers. The alumni of the show have gotten 54 Grammy nominations and won 13 actual Grammys. These are the people that kind of went through the show. Do you know they generated more than 450 Billboard #1 hits? Those people. And 260 million downloads and more than 80 platinum records. It's crazy, isn't it? And over 100,000 people every year try to get on the show for that very reason. See, because here's the thing. Whether it's this show or another show, it doesn't really matter. This is not new. People love their 15 minutes of fame. And they want to be idolized, and we love to idolize others. That's why 30 million people tune in. In America, we still love our heroes. Kids and adults alike, idolize athletes and entertainers, and we know that's because people seek to meet famous people or get things that are autographed by famous people. And now that may or may not be true of you. You might be one of those people who's like, yeah, I don't care. I don't idolize anybody. But here's the thing. Every single one of us has a tendency to idolize someone or something, and it has the potential to derail everything about our life. And what God does is He deals with idols throughout all the history. Now, if you've read your Bible at any length, you'll know that idols come up. And when you picture idols from the Bible, what do you usually picture? Statue, right? Some other statue, there's some different sizes, right? We picture, maybe something that looks a little like Buddha or, some weird thing, a little shrine that sits in their house. And God is saying, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't worship these. And most of us are like, yeah, preach it. Never, you shouldn't do that. We should never have these idols. And I can't believe the Israelites would do that. But it's so much bigger than that, which you probably already know. Here's a definition. What's an idol? An idol is any person or thing regarded with blind admiration, adoration, or devotion that is revered, admired, or highly loved. That kind of grows what could be an idol, doesn't it? And idols have this weird way of worming their way into our hearts in a way that we don't even know they're there. And the reason this is such a big topic, the reason God spent so much time telling the Israelites and us why idols are a problem is because idols are all about, where do I get my security? Like, you understand that it wasn't really the statue that was the issue. The issue was that people would put it there and say, that's where I'm turning when I'm in trouble. That's why all cultures that have had these, the gods, the idols they have is when they say, oh, I want to make sure that the crop is good, so I'm going to make a sacrifice because this thing has the ability to make my life better. Unless you think that is dead and gone, in our culture, I can't tell you how many people said, oh yeah, in the corner of that building, they buried a little statue of a saint because we wanted to be this church to be blessed or this building to be blessed. You see this all the time, right? And idols have this way of creeping in because it's where we put our trust. And if you think that this is not an issue for you, let me ask you if you've ever said something like this. If I won the lottery, I could finally relax. How about this? When my husband or wife is upset, there's just no way I could be happy. If I'm not being productive, the day just felt like such a waste. You know what? I worry about whether I'll have enough money to retire. I just can't rest unless I know where my kids are at all times. Why doesn't God bring the right person into my life? Being single is keeping me lonely and miserable. Other people are mostly incompetent. Why can't they do it right? See, no one's ever said that. You know what? If I could just get past this particular sin in my life, then I'll be transparent with other people. If you've said or thought any of those or anything like them, they're reflections of possible idols in your heart. And so that's why we're going to look at this, because whether it's a statue or an attitude, the problem with idols resides right there in our hearts. And they're deeply damaging because they prevent the very thing that we desperately desire most times. So, in order to move in the right direction, this is what we're going to do for the next 3 weeks. There's two things that have to happen. We actually have to be able to identify them. What are they? Because they're not statues for us, but there's something a little more insidious that's maybe a little more subtle. So we need to identify what those idols are, and then what do we do with it? How do we deal with them? Because if you want to deal with the idols of your heart, it is serious business. Because your enemy, the devil, does not want you to deal with them. So it's hard work. So we're going to talk about that. So that's what we're going to do in this little series, this little 3-week series. We're going to look at idols, how to identify them, and what to do with them. So let's jump in, because we're going to look at why these are so damaging and why we need to do it. In fact, there's an interesting thing that you would think this would go away when you became a Christ follower. When you accept Jesus into your heart, you say, look, I'm accepting your forgiveness. I want you to come in. I want you to rule my life. You would think that would deal with it, but it doesn't. At least not in some magical, automatic way. That's why Paul, and you guys know this verse, is why we have to do this intentionally. Paul wrote this. He said, don't conform any longer to the pattern of the world, right? Be transformed by renewing your mind, and then you can test and approve what God's will is, good, pleasing, and perfect will. There are so many things in our minds that we have to adjust and change because our minds are conforming to the world and not to the pattern Jesus gave us. So, all that's preamble, because we're going to look at 3 idols. Now, there are tons more, but these are 3 that are very unique to Americans. It's a cultural thing. It's what we've grown up with. It's how our country has come into being, and there are 3 idols that we have brought into our Christianity, into our belief system, and they aren't equally represented around the world. And so we're going to look at 3 over the next 3 weeks that are very much, I think, a problem in the church and among a lot of us. And there's these 3 idols right here. The idol of individualism, consumerism, and materialism. Okay? So that's the outline for the next 3 weeks. So let's jump in to the first one, which is the idol of individualism. Now, let's take a look at it. What does that even mean? What is the idol of individualism? Because here's the thing. Individualism is seen as a positive thing in our culture, right? In the Western culture. Individualism is great. If you read all the adventure stories of how our country came to be, they're all wrapped around individualism. We admire that. Do you realize how unusual that is in the world? I don't know if you've ever thought of this, but in most cultures outside of the Western world, this is a foreign concept because everything is about community. They don't live in isolation. They live in family groupings. They're larger. They stay together longer. They actually share space. Celebrations and festivals always involve, a lot of places involve entire neighborhoods, entire towns. People are crammed together, partly because of economics, so that no one really gets to spend a lot of time together. Right? We were in one of our trips to, when we went to Egypt and Jordan, we got to have dinner with a local family, and they talked about in their house, every time one of their kids got married and started their own family, they just added another floor. Right? So they were all there. They're all connected. And there was practical reasons, but that's what they do. People exist for the good of the community. They don't get to keep themselves. They don't even get to keep their money to themselves. And this whole idea of alone time and my own personal space is foreign. But for us, it's just how we live. It's taken over. It's the way we do things. You've all heard the term rugged individualist, right? We admire people like that. And so even though we're no longer explorers like we were, we still keep the same attitude. I mean, think about this. And I just did this. We build fences around our yard. So we have our own space. Or we move into the country so that our nearest neighbor is a quarter of a mile away. My space. We hear statements like this. It's time to focus on me now. You know, for the next while, I'm just catering to myself. We build our schedules around, and we actually give up getting together because of our entertainment desires. And if we disagree with the people that are leading us, we say, you know what? I'm going to do it my way, or I'm just going to leave. We don't want to depend on anyone or anything. We are our own people, and no one's going to tell us what to do. And you know how I know that's true in the church? Because I have yet to meet a person who says, you know what? If you have any trouble, I'm there for you. I will come. I will do anything for you. And then I say, but when you're in trouble, do you ask anybody? Nope. I don't want to burden anybody. I'm just going to do it myself. It's all about meeting my needs, my goals, my desires, and at some level, even though we may not think this outright, our happiness depends on it. So, Jesus understood all this. He understood this tendency to preoccupation with self. And so I want to take you to an account this morning found in Luke chapter 12. It's one of the gospel accounts. And Jesus is speaking with a crowd. And they're eagerly listening to all his teachings. We know they're engaged because of the way this whole conversation starts. Someone in the crowd said to him, this is in Luke chapter 12, starting at verse 13. He says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." So this guy was obviously having an issue, a conflict, something. And he's like, I'm listening to Jesus. Jesus is saying all these great things. Hey, Jesus, can you jump in on this? Can you kind of be a part of this? And I love Jesus' reply. "Man, who appointed me judge or an arbiter between you?" Doesn't answer the question at all. But here's what he does, is he sees underneath the question, and he sees a teaching moment. So, he says to all these people, he says, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Jesus is seeing past the actual request to the heart of the request. And so Jesus tells a story, a parable, one you probably have heard many times, that illustrates this idea of the idol of individualism so well. Because he goes on to say this. He told them a parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Now, we'll pause right there. This is a man who is utterly consumed with himself. You can actually tell by just looking at the language. Look at how many times the word I, me, myself appear in this. Look at the focus. Thought to himself, what am I going to do? I have no place to store my stuff. Here's what I'll do. Right? I'll take my things and I'm going to put these things in place. And you can just see this man is utterly consumed with everything he has and everything he does, and he wants to make sure he gets to enjoy the benefits of his hard work. And so he makes a plan. He's going to deal with the results of this hard work. I'm going to build new buildings. I'm going to manage this stuff. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to do the best I can. His entire energies were around making his life good and comfortable, which is an exact description of many of us in our culture today. So, let's settle on a definition for the idol of individualism, one that hopefully we can get our mind on. So, individualism is this. Oh boy, that doesn't come up very well. It's the pursuit of me. The idol of individualism is simply the pursuit of me. It's putting myself first. And before you think that this doesn't apply to you, let me ask you, when was the last time you allowed God to interrupt your carefully daily planned schedule? Or were you even paying attention to whether he could? Have you ever said, I deserve this? Have you ever driven by someone on the road and the thought went through your mind, I should stop and help them, but you were just so busy and you weren't sure, and so you just kept right on going? Let me ask you this. Do you refer to your faith as your personal relationship with God? That's not a Jesus thing. You know, the Lord's Prayer was our Father. Community. Interesting. Do you ever find yourself demanding me time, especially in a busy week? Do you ever feel bummed out or miffed because you put a lot of energy into something and somebody else got all the recognition? See, it's so easy for this preoccupation with self, with this pursuit of me, to worm its way into our hearts. And that's all the idol of individualism is in our culture. It's the pursuit of me. Now, understand, there's nothing wrong with planning. There's nothing wrong with managing your stuff. There's nothing wrong with having good things. But the sin, this pursuit of self is a sin. It's wrong, it's evil, and it's damaging. So let's take a look. What is the problem then? So you say, okay, I'm not even sure if this applies to me. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But what is so damaging about this? I mean, yeah, I'm a little preoccupied with myself, but what's the big deal? Well, the problem with the pursuit of me is, who's the focal point of your life? Me. I'm the focal point. I'm the one who makes all the decisions. Everything I do, my decisions, my thoughts are dictated by my circumstances and what I like and what I want to do. And so here's the main problem. The pursuit of me, boy, that does not come out, is a chase with no end. The pursuit of me is a chase that has no logical end, because no matter how much you focus on you, no matter how much I focus on my wants, my needs, I will never be satisfied. Ever. And when I feel satisfied, it usually lasts for about a day or a week. And then we're on to the next thing. You'll always want more. Things will never be good enough. You'll never be secure enough. You'll never be liked enough. You can actually see some of the details of this as you unpack it in here. When Jesus told this story. So because I would break it down this way. There's a few different things that come out of this pursuit of me that has a chase with no end, because here's what happens. First thing is it actually keeps you from proper relationships. This one is kind of implied, but this man, his entire life, all of his energy, all of his efforts is spent on his job, his stuff. It's funny, he has no time for people, because this is about, look, I got stuff to do, I have retirement to plan for, I got to do new things. There's no time for people. The pursuit of me actually keeps me from proper relationships. And do you know why? Because people are inconvenient. And you all know this. There's rarely such thing as a convenient person, because when they call or when they need help or when you're supposed to do something, you're like, oh, I'm so tired. I don't want to do this. I know this is true. I came home from this thing last night. I spoke at that whole Saturday Night Live. I'm just so tired. It was one of those weeks. I'm like, I just want to go inside. But my neighbors were sitting outside. God said, go talk to them. It wasn't really convenient. I could have easily just gone up the steps and said, hey, Frank, hey there. No, go have a conversation. And it was wonderful. It was great. And it didn't even last all that long. But you know what? We do this all the time. Because we're unwilling. We want this deeper community. We want the relationships that come with someone really knowing about us, but we're unwilling to make our change in our lives to make it happen. We're so busy or too tired, we won't walk across the street. We won't talk to the next door neighbor. We would never confront somebody about the problems in their life because, that's just so uncomfortable, I don't want to do that. It's the idol of individualism. I'll never have people over to my house. I'm not comfortable in my house. I'm not a good cook. The idol of individualism playing its part. Weirdly enough, too, and it's funny because sometimes relationships themselves actually become how our idol of individualism is actually expressed. Like this, we get so preoccupied with our children or our grandchildren that they exhaust everything about us and we have no time for anything else. Or we just don't have time to develop relationships with non-Christ followers because we're so catering to the demands of our own family, we just don't have time for anything else. Interesting. It also prevents generosity because this really impacted his money. Take a look at what this guy does. This man Jesus is speaking about, he's not spending any of his excess money on others. He's not giving it away. This is his retirement fund. Do you see? I love the picture here. He says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my barns. My perfectly good, perfectly usable, perfectly sufficient barns. I'm going to tear them down. To do what? Build bigger ones. Because I got so much stuff. I need more. And so his entire focus is on this. His focus was on me. And we do this all the time. And I know that. Because you look at your refrigerator and you think, ugh, I need a new refrigerator. Does it work? Yep. Is there a problem with it? Nope. But I need a new one. Take the old one away. We do this all the time. right? This is this preoccupation. By the way, I'm not saying it's bad, because we need a new refrigerator, and ours works fine. So that's not the problem, right? But this stuff happens, and there's this preoccupation with more and better and more and me and what I want and what I'm going to be comfortable with and what the house is going to look like and what kind of car I'm going to have. We can't afford to be generous because we're so stretched, we can't give any of it up. Or we want to be generous, but we think, man, if I was going to be generous, I'd have to get a second job, or I'd have to change how I live, and I don't want to. You know what? I don't totally agree or like the leader of my church, so I'm not giving anything to them. Or you know what? I give my time and energy, so I don't need to give money. Yeah, okay. All symptoms of the idol of individualism. There's another one. It actually stops flexibility. This man, as Jesus is talking about, it impacted the way he used his time. Do you notice that his energies are all wrapped up in the construction and the doing of his new thing? This is his priority. I'm going to tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger ones. I'm going to take everything I've harvested. It's going to go in these new barns. All my energy is focused on my stuff, my job, my work, my results. But when we do this, when we succumb to this idol of individualism, it actually affects how we spend our time. We get so busy that we literally have no time for other people. That's a convicting one for me, because I think, when was the last time, we always try and filter it, like, when was the last time we had someone in our house? When was the last time we went out for dinner? When was the last time we hung out with people? And if the answer is, I think it's been about 6 months, might be too busy. I work hard all week. Weekends is about fun time. Yeah, Weldon's been talking about life groups, but honestly, that's really busy. I have a lot of commitments. I'm not really going to invest in that time. You know what? Getting time alone with God, it's just impossible. There's no room for God to prompt us into anything because our time and priorities are all messed up. There's an interesting story. In 1985, there was a celebration in New Orleans. It was the end of an entire summer, and it was the municipal pool, and they were celebrating because it was an entire season of safety. There had been no drownings, no fatalities, no nothing, so they had about 200 dignitaries and about 100 lifeguards, and they came to celebrate. They had this whole party. As the party began to clear out, they saw a guy on the bottom of the pool. They dragged him out, they tried to revive him, and he was dead. And I don't know if you see the irony in that. 100 lifeguards celebrating their success at protecting people, and someone died. When the idol of individualism, it consumes us, we don't even see the opportunities because we don't have time for it. It's all focused inward. Which means it warps our priorities. Our priorities are out of line. This guy's entire life was about himself, getting his life in order, and the primary determinant for what he did was him. And remember, let me rephrase, or reiterate, it's not about planning's bad or anything like that, but the consumption, the whole priority was me. And we say things like this, if I don't enjoy it, I'm not doing it. If it makes me uncomfortable, that's not for me. I've always thought about going on a missions trip, but it means I have to get on an airplane and I'm scared to fly, so I'm not going to go. I've heard that, by the way. I'll do whatever it takes or whatever hours are necessary because there's a next level at work, there's another promotion. I will do what it takes to get it done, then I'll relax. And ultimately, the idol of individualism stops the man's relationship with God because he has no thoughts for God in any of this. God is not even a part of the equation for him. I don't know if you caught the irony in here. Do you know how this starts out? It's not out here, but the very parable that Jesus says starts out with, the ground produced a good crop. Which means everything he had that's causing all of this, he had no control over. It all came from God. In other words, everything he had, all the blessings he had, were from God. He was the beneficiary of God actually doing something in his life. And yet his focus was on hoarding it and keeping it. See, it wrecks our pursuit of God because it's all about us. And what the irony is that the things that we are so hung up on, we forget that if it wasn't for God, you wouldn't have anything to hang on to anyway. And when we are at the center, which is the idol of individualism, the pursuit of me, we become users of God. God, what can you do for me? How can you bless me? How can you fix these circumstances? I need you to fix my family. I need you to fix my kids. I need you to fix my parents. I need you to fix my money problem. I need you to fix this. And what we become is we become users. God exists because we want him to help us. So, how do you kill it? How do you destroy this idol that's kind of creeps in and is actually celebrated in our culture? If the pursuit of me is a chase with no end, what do we do with that? Well, the clue is in God's response. Here's what God said to him. He said, "You fool. This night your life will be demanded from you, and then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" This is how it will be. This is when Jesus pauses. He's done the story. Turns to his audience, right? He's just finished, and he says, "Now, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich towards God." You want to know how to destroy the idol of individualism? This pursuit of me that has no end? The pursuit of me is destroyed by putting first things first. It's all about what we prioritize and what we allow to take center stage in our life. God calls this man a fool, which is actually pretty strong language. He's saying, look, your entire life, the entirety of your life, everything you've done has no value. It's irrelevant. It's not even going to live past you. It's like he's saying, look, you idiot, you're spending all this time on yourself and what you want, and you're ignoring me, but I'm the one who decides when your life is over, and I'm the one who evaluates what it's worth. The issue wasn't what he did, it was what he was at the heart of it. And the idol of individualism is all about this pursuit of me in terms of our money, our relationships, our time, our relationships with people, with God. So, if we want to kill it, by the way, you say, well, that's easy to say. Well, what does that mean to put first things first? Really, it's two things. You have to let God realign your thinking. And Jesus says that this man should have been rich towards God. What does that even mean? How do I live a life that's rich towards God? Because it's not just a money thing. When Jesus is saying to be rich towards God, he simply means I'm putting God's kingdom, God's reasonings, God's motives, God's plans ahead of mine. Mine are second. They're behind his. He's first. It's an attitude that says his priorities take precedence over my priorities. Well, how do you even do that? Well, honestly, it's just about asking questions. Honestly, and you'll see this as you know me as we continue to go as I pastor, and you'll talk to me. I'll keep asking you to say to yourself, why? Why? Ask yourself this question all the time. Why do I feel like I do? Why do I want this thing so badly? Why am I bothered when things are going wrong? There's something off in my thinking. So why is it that this is bugging me so much? Or why do I want this so bad? Or when you don't get it, why are you so bummed? And how might God want me to respond instead to this situation that's right in front of me right now? Right? There's a change in thinking. You haven't even done anything yet. You're just trying to think it through a little differently. And then, of course, that's followed by letting God then determine your actions, which is really a logical outflow of the first. This man in this parable stored up everything for himself because his focus was him. His focus was what he could get out of it, what his life was going to be, how comfortable it was going to be. And so his thinking determined his actions. He had no room for God in his thinking, so all of his actions were about him. So if you want to look at backwards, if all of our actions are about ourselves or there's things that are about ourselves, it's probably an indicator that our thinking is off. I don't know what that looks like for you. It's going to be different for every one of us. But if you're looking for some suggestions, if you're someone who has trouble with time, make space to invite people into your home. Allow them to see how you live. And if you really want to be brave, don't clean up. No. Decide to become vulnerable. Seek people out. Or tell God, as you start each day this week, God, you have the full permission to interrupt every day this week, and let me hear you when you do. And I will do whatever it is you interrupt my life with. Ooh. Right? Especially if you're a planner, that's a hard one. Maybe it's just, don't do life on your own. Invite people into it. That's why life groups are so important. Let people see what's going on. Don't hold your struggles close. Say, look, I'm going to be vulnerable with all of you. Or maybe when you feel like complaining, praise Him instead. When you feel like everything's closing in on you, pray for others. Or maybe serve. Don't do what just fills your needs or the thing that you're comfortable doing. Say, God, what do you want me to do? And then just do it. It takes you out of this pursuit of me and puts you into the frame of God. Or maybe just increase your generosity and give more money away. You know, the tragedy of this story is not only did this man not have life the way he wanted, but his life was entirely wasted. No point. No value. If we want to get away from this pursuit of me, we have to put what's the priority of the first things first. This is not so much about stopping doing the wrong things, but learning to put what's important at the front. Have you ever heard that whole thing? You know, people used to say, like, it's God first, family second, work third, church fourth, and people move this whole thing around. It was this very noble Christian thing about how we're going to prioritize everything. That's a completely wrong way of looking at life. Do you know that? Because the priority is simply this. God's priorities. End. Right? Everything else comes in underneath that. And we say, God, I trust you enough that I'm just going to put your priorities first, and whatever that looks like and wherever that is, I'm in. And I'll follow you. That's how you kill the idol of individualism. Martin Luther said, what a man loves, that's his God. So here's the questions I want to leave you with this week is, what do you love? Because God wants center stage, and He doesn't share it. He wants us to be seeking Him, and idols prevent that from happening. So what are they? What are your heart idols? And here's what I want you to be thinking about. And if you have trouble, because you might know right off the top of your head, oh yeah, I know what they are. But if you don't, ask yourself these questions. What is my greatest nightmare? In other words, what do you worry about the most? When you're laying in your bed or when things are quiet and you're worrying about, oh my goodness, what could happen? I don't know what is that? It's usually reflective of a heart idol. Secondly, what do I rely on or comfort myself when things go bad or get difficult? So when you have a really lousy day this week, and you go home and you said, oh, I just need blank. What is it? Why? And what do I think most easily about? In other words, what preoccupies my mind? When my mind is free to go, like you're mowing the lawn, you're doing something where you don't really have to be totally engaged and your mind starts to drift, what does it drift to? Because it often reveals the idols of our heart. All good? It's hard stuff because if you want to kill this, it's going to take some effort, and it's going to take repetition, and it's going to take time, but it is worth it. So let me pray for you. We'll close by singing Graves into Gardens again, which I think is a fantastic song that says, God, you are the only one worthy of the priority in my life. So why don't the worship team come on up? I want to pray for us, and then the next 2 weeks will be interesting because this might not hit hard with you. You might be okay. But next week we're going to look at the idol of consumerism, which I think is a devastating idol in our churches in America. And then the third week, we're going to look at materialism, which is the one that you'll all stay home for because you don't want to talk about money. Right? I'm preaching to myself, just so you know. I'm as convicted on these as anyone, maybe more so. Lord, would you convict us? We invite you to convict us. We don't want to be complacent. And more than anything else, we do not want to get to the end of our lives and know that it was a complete waste. We want it to matter. We want our lives to have value. We want to be able to stand in front of you someday and hear those words that say, well done, good and faithful servant. And we know that our heart idols will get in the way of that. So would you reveal to us, would you just peel back the curtain and let us see what's really going on, and then help us to prioritize first things first. And then give us the joy of seeing what that does in us and through us in the world around us. We love you, and we thank you for your patience with us and that you love us enough to walk through this with us. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.